how that fits in is now that we've had them for 5 years, we've got to start replacing or we add to. And so IT's done a great job of bidding and taking a look at what our options are, but they are expensive.
I would think cell phones would be less expensive.
They would, but what gives us the opportunity as a city is we're able to speak to each other.
That's right.
And at any point in time, and
I know.
that capability is huge, especially when there's a special event downtown.
We have to for special
Events
events.
Or
emergency response. It's critical.
$4,500 for one of those?
Yes.
Now,
that
we are looking
really
at there are
blew me
some
away.
products coming out that
Well,
are
walkie-talkies.
potentially less expensive that we're looking at, IT's looking at, that might fit some of those needs better.
Yeah, and you think with the technology we have out, that we could get, I don't know, those things would be a lot less expensive.
But that is an expense that not just this department, but all of the departments have within. And
Right.
but you know, when you purchasing two, you're looking at $10,000. And so just continue to keep those kind of things in mind, that it's a must, but at the same time it can take a hit within. That's what I have within the budget. I'll be happy to answer any specific questions if you have with the items. Like I said, we moved the grants to the capital within the forecaster budget so that you see it all within one area, and those are broken down.
I have a question. I know it's a timing thing of when y'all take over the maintenance of the cemeteries, and I've spoken with Eric about now that Rest Haven seems to be more popular, we have more people in there, and we're discovering from some experts.
That's not kind of bad.
It's full.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mike, you're just dying to get in. That was a good one.
We found that some of the monuments and things, matter of fact, in the last 6 months, one of the larger monuments fell over in one of the sections. So there's a maintenance responsibility that the city's going to have to take on making sure that those things are safe. And, you know, we've got a grant that, we're applying for historical registration. And once you get that, of course, there'll be more opportunities. But we kind of need a bridge in the meantime to just make sure that things that might be imminent are handled. And, you know, usually on grants and things that they require that you have somebody that's certified and those kinds of things. So to get staff certified that they would be able to do this instead of us having to hire this out, that's something we need to consider. Usually the materials and expense are not great from what I understand, depending on what has to be done. But we need to put that bridge amount somewhere in here in the time that they take the maintenance and the time that the streets get to that. So we just need to consider that.
Thank you for bringing that up. The parks in the planning department currently are working on a preservation plan for the cemeteries to establish not just a overall plan, but a maintenance plan. When we do take it over, the street departments have done a wonderful job of what they've done, and now it's come down to the preservation of it. And so how does other cities do it? And they do have great programs out there. So we've taken a look at several models, and we believe that whether it's a CIP page, that each year something is being done in a small scale, or within the budget itself that we establish, basically you're taking the cemeteries as a grid, what's the worst, and then working our way, whether it's certifications through personnel or we contract the service out. But we've got to provide the funding. And those are the things that we have to look at in those areas. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else that I may answer?
And the good news is that Hotel Motel is going to have more money.
Yes.
Yes.
Which provides opportunities to, as we've spoken, to prioritize, and we're putting a lot of those projects into priorities.
As the convention center comes on later this year.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the monthly reports for information only, and we got the new got something that's in our space today.
We did add in the preliminary revenue
Yes.
projections for
Yes.
2013, 14, and 15. Of course, 13 is the primary focus in putting this budget together. And this is something we're going to continually revisit throughout this budget process, but we wanted to give you what we had at this point, what we're working from. I think you'll see a decent moderate growth assumed at this point. We still think we're on the low end of some of the assumptions that are out there around sales tax, et cetera, but this does incorporate the good numbers we got for December that are now as part of this, and I think we assumed, what, 3.5%?
We did change it based on the December number up to 3.5. I would add that the State Funding Board has already made a recommendation to the governor for his budget, somewhere between 3 3/4 and 4.25%. So we're on the low side of what the state estimates are.
And we typically beat the state most of the time, although there have been a few months we haven't,
gonna
which
say,
we think
yeah.
are maybe tied to the bump in auto sales overall, because we don't get much from an automobile sale. We get about $18, whereas the state gets to tax on the whole purchase that we don't.
Yeah. Not good.
And we had built in, what, 2.5 for this year?
2.5 for this year.
That was very helpful to look at in this. I guess the secondary thing, I had 2 sheets of this. You know, I don't know that you've given me that.
One was condensed.
One's sort of a
Right.
summary level, and the other has
But
the detail behind it.
this other one has a lot of detail in there. You know, you put the TIF in and some other things like that. That was really,
Estimates about property tax
yeah.
growth. What we wanted you to see is that there is a lot of thought that goes into doing these estimates. I mean, we typically don't just take last year and add 4% to it. I know that's been a trend for many people in the past, and we got a pretty good schooling in 2008 and 9 about it.
Exactly.
And I must tell you, too, the rating agencies are putting a lot more emphasis on knowing how we're estimating. You know, what is the basis of all of these estimates that we do. So we're trying to be as detailed and transparent, as careful as we can in doing this. But again, they're very preliminary. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
things you have to remember is the property tax really doesn't come in until the end of February, 1st of March. So the collection percentage won't be known until after that. The business tax, the big chunk that comes from the stores in the mall comes in May and June. So it's very late receiving that. The hall income tax, we don't know until July, after the fiscal year is ended. So, you know, we're attempting to make these adjustments based on all of the various information sources that we have. But we thought it would be helpful to go ahead and give this to you.
I think this is very important.
We'll bring this back next month
Yeah.
to look at, and of course, as we get closer to May, when we put out our recommended budget, we get more and more precise on this, and this becomes basically how big the pie is and what we're working
Yeah.
with in terms of the budget.
I did have a question on that about the debt service. You know, we had budgeted a certain amount, and then it says estimated, though, is about 400 and something thousand less than that, but it showed in the 2013 that it would be almost the same thing. It would be less than what we had budgeted in 2012.
A couple of things there. The rebate was not included. You remember we talked
Okay,
about the
yeah.
taxable bonds.
We have that Build America bonds.
Yeah.
As you know, some of this is still variable rate debt. The
okay.
percentages that we're paying are absurdly low at this point. I mean, they're still in the 20 and 30 hundredths of 1% range. So the estimates that we had we're coming in well under those. But those are the best estimates that we have for 13, 14, and 15 at this time.
Okay.
You know, whenever you said variable rate don't we also have those things that don't kick in for 15 or 20 years that are on variable rate?
Not variable rate.
They're
We have,
buying and selling them though, aren't they?
when we refunded Harlandsdale and also refunded some of the variable rate debt that we had with the bond fund, I'm trying to remember now, there were some delayed payments that we had,
Right.
but I think they're all on fixed rate now,
Okay.
or they're swapped to a fixed
Swap.
rate.
Swap.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were-
So there's nothing where there's long,
Right.
open exposure in those out years. We've really reduced all of that except one issue with the bond fund.
So, but now the swaps will be to a fixed rate that is known at this time?
Yes.
Okay, okay. The other question that I had was, and I forgot to look back at this and I read my note here. Have we had 2 straight months of losses in the conference center? One before this one or this one?
I think December was very good. January was less so.
Right, but what about, was it November? Because didn't we have?
November, I think October, November were very good.
Because I thought we had another one
There was
that
one
we
other
had to pay
time.
back
In this
before.
fiscal year.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
But not back to back.
Oh, okay, okay. But-
Well, typically July is a bad month. In August, you have conferences. September's okay. October, you have a bunch of conferences. December, you have social events. January, it drops off because everybody's worn out from the holidays.
But we have had one this fiscal year where we had to
We have. and I-
pay them instead of them paying
The
us.
thing I would point out is, help me if I remember, it's about $446,000 to the positive year to date.
Yeah, I do.
It's good overall.
So, and half of that is ours because we share it with the county, so. And the spring, you'll have a bunch of conferences too, so they're on track to have a very good year.
And I guess we'll talk later about fuel hedging. I noticed that you had bumped up those numbers once this current contract goes out, so.
We did, and based on this week, I wish I had hedged a little more.
That's what I was thinking too.
That's what I said. Didn't I tell you that, Rose?
Anything else
said
that we
go for it.
need?
Well,
that
we were
need to
trying
talk
to be
about?
conservative
And I
and
said,
wait and see
no,
if
it's
those
gonna go
prices
up.
fell.
Well, and they did for a
little birdie
while,
told me that.
but not at the moment,
Not
right?
enough to hit our offered price.
Yeah.
I heard about that.
Anything else that we need to look at on those? Okay, is there,
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor, say
You've done
aye.
real good. You did real good.
Okay.
Yeah, y'all lost me in the last
My
one.
God, that's
I cleaned out the papers.
Thank y'all, good job on that.
It's really very helpful to have these extra details.